What's one weird rule your parents had growing up that you thought was totally normal until you got older? Story 1: No one allowed in or out of the house on New Year's Day until my red-headed uncle came to visit. It's good luck if the first person in the door on New Year's is a redhead. There were 10 kids in my mom's family. Poor Uncle Bill was run ragged by 2 p.m. Story 2: Always talk to the cat in a normal voice and not in the baby talk voice people do with pets, because he will think you're stupid. He probably does anyway. Story 3: No closed doors to bedrooms and bathrooms. Even if you were sleeping or taking a shower or taking a dump, I can't in a public restroom, because though I know this will never happen, I somehow am afraid of someone getting mad at me for closing the stall door. Story 4: Not being able to use the couch cushions, pillows, and blankets, because those were only to decorate when we had guests over. Ends up my mom has untreated OCD and only told us years later. LOL explains a lot of her behavior. Story 5: My mom always told me growing up that I could wear any color nail polish I wanted, except for red, because, and I quote, "it's a color that hookers wear, so bizarre." Story 6: The interrupt rule. If we wanted to talk to our parents but they were talking to someone else, we would place our hand on their arm. They would acknowledge it by placing their hand on ours, and then we would keep our hands there until they turned to ask us what we needed. I did it to a teacher, and I'll never forget how confused and frankly a little freaked out she looked seeing a child just touching her arm and staring at her while she was talking to another teacher. Story 7: We were not allowed to invite a friend over for a sleepover 2 times in a row. They had a host first before we could invite them again. Looking back, I think this was my mom's way of avoiding sleepovers. Story 8: If I had a friend over, went to a friend's house, went to the mall with a friend, or even went outside and played with any other kids one weekend, I better not even ask to do anything the following weekend. Many weekends I spent alone in my room. I was a straight A kid too, and at 17, I had a 9 p.m. curfew on Saturday nights. Story 9: Soft drinks are adult drinks. Imagine my horror when I went to a birthday party in kindergarten and the mom started to serve soft drinks to us 5-year-olds. Being the rule follower that I was, I said that I wasn't allowed to drink it because it was an adult drink. The mom convinced me that my parents would be okay if I had a glass. I remember being very upset with my parents after the party because I was so embarrassed. Story 10: When our father got home from work, would be sent to our rooms, sometimes until the time he left the next morning. He'd get home and not want to interact with us, so would be sent off across the house, checked on occasionally, spanked, or yelled at if we got too loud. Luckily, I had my older brother, but it got lonely. And it was better than being around him because he was mean and aggressive. He once left black and blue belt stripes across my brother's back because he was caught jumping on the bed again. When I was 2 or 3, he put me in timeout, facing the corner. Then he fell asleep, and hours later, I wandered off to go play. He woke up and got angry I left. So he busted into my room, grabbed me by the ankle, and lifted me upside down to administer a thankfully brief beating. When he'd call us out of our room, he'd scream our names, and we were so scared he was going to yell at us or hit us, so the rule was when Dad gets home, go to your room. Story 11: I couldn't listen to modern music BC. It was all inappropriate. It turns out my parents, mainly my mom, was just low-key racist. She forced us to listen to her music, which was all about drugs, but all done by white people. Story 12: My dad used to tell us that we weren't allowed to touch the painted parts of the car because it would mess it up. Only touch the handles. This was so completely ingrained in me that even as an adult, I thought that car paint was somehow easily ruined. It wasn't until working in the automotive industry that I realized that, in fact, it's quite durable and, made to be on the road. Story 13: When we were little and the Avon lady would come knocking on our door, my mom would tell us to be very quiet and to not make a noise because it's the mean Avon lady and she has a gun. Oh, we totally believed her, and it wasn't until I was in the 8th grade that we moved and my little sister's friend's dad would sell Avon at swap meets. We asked if he had a gun, and her friend looked so confused. We figured then that my mom was just telling us a story to make sure we were quiet, so she didn't have to open the door and deal with the Avon lady. It is still one of the silliest memories of my childhood, and up until my mom passed away 4 years ago, we would give her such a hard time for it. Her response was always, well, it got you to be quiet. And she always went away. I don't know if it's really a rule, but maybe it was we were never to answer the door to those women. I miss my mom so much. Edit spelling. Story 14. I have 2. I haven't seen mention one. You must wake up at 6 a.m., regardless of day, and will be punished if you failed. I often did fail as I had undiagnosed ADHD at the time, and it led to frequent arguments. They said it was to prepare me for the adult world. I now don't wake up even close to that early for my actual adult job, too. I was not allowed to interact with males, as they were worried about me getting into a relationship while I was still in school. As a result, my closest relationships growing up were with other women, and now I am gay. Story 15, my parents would check my and my brother's teeth for sugar bugs every night after we brushed our teeth. Before we got in bed, if they thought we were trying to skip brushing our teeth, they would tell us they could see the sugar bugs and would make us go brush again. My brother and I were so convinced these sugar bugs were real. We would constantly ask when we'd be able to see them. My parents always told us only people 13 and older could see them. But by the time we got to be 13, we had completely forgotten about the sugar bugs in our teeth. Story 16, if mom's bedroom door is closed, do not knock. Do not open. If one of us has a severed arm, ask yourself, do you really need to knock on her door? Maybe it wasn't a rule per se, but we knew the rule. Story 17, we weren't really allowed to lock the bathroom door. It wasn't a rule, we only had one bathroom. There were 5 of us. It was fairly rare to be able to bathe or shower without someone else needing to use the bathroom. In the mornings, my sister would be doing her hair in front of the sink while someone was in the shower, and then someone else would come in to use the toilet or grab laundry. We left it all in a pile on the floor. The bathroom was big enough for all of this. Also, my mom was a naked mom, and I think she hated folding laundry. We had clean clothes, but they were all in a huge laundry basket in the pantry, which was at the other end of the house from the bathroom and bedrooms. So we all made partially clothed dashes down the hall, through the kitchen to the pantry, to find clothes. Shockingly, I have no trouble using the toilet in front of anyone and talking to them at the same time, or vice versa. It has been commented on positively in my last few relationships. It also came in very handy having kids because they seem to know I sat down and barged in to ask me something. I am also really comfortable naked, but no one I've dated has complained about that one either. Story 18, how to call every adult by their last name Mr. and Mrs. even when they wanted to be called by their first name. Wanted me to call someone by their last name when they were 28 years old and I was 12, and it went against their wishes to be called Sam blows my mind and undermines the other adults. Story 19, the current weird rule here is no food in the living room. Our kids sit in the foyer with their snack food. Adult friends follow the rules too until the kids go to bed. Saves me from digging crumbs out of the couch, and it's way easier mopping spills on tile than from carpet. I remember the first time I ate in the living room as a kid. It was liberating. Story 20, we weren't necessarily allowed to get hurt. At least I wasn't. My dad deemed it unsightly and unladylike at first. I liked to climb trees, and such as a kid, and he noticed I had a scab on my arm when I was in the 5th grade. Snatched me up by my arm and yelled at me, telling me it made me ugly and no boy would ever love or want to be with me if I had a bunch of scars. Then got mad at me when I said I hope a boy would not want to be with me over some scars on my skin. That's shallow. Turns out he was right, but it wasn't about physical scars. Nobody wants to be with someone covered in emotional scars. He left also the same man who told me I was fat that same summer and wouldn't allow me to eat past 5 p.m. because I get fat and nobody likes fat women. I also had to ask permission for food and or eat within his restricted times and regulations until I was like 17. If I ate outside of his restrictions, he tore me a new one. I have a very complicated relationship with food and my body now. There's plenty more, but yeah, my dad sucked. Story 21, we couldn't talk while at the dinner table. That's why me and my siblings are fast eaters, 5 minute or less. It has definitely messed with my ability to sense if I'm full. I can binge eat like no one else in my life. My husband can finish 34 of his food and be full, and I can eat mine and finish his plate and the rest of the sides. It's terrible. Story 22, had to drink 2 full glasses of milk before being allowed 1 cup of Diet Coke. The room at the top of the stairs with a short door was a monster room, and I wasn't allowed to open the door. It was just a storage closet. There wasn't even anything interesting inside. Story 23, can only wear jeans once a week. Cannot change at school by hiding jeans in your backpack. Mom will come and check and make you change. No black eyeliner. You will become if you wear black eyeliner. No crying in public. You will be an embarrassment to the family. Story 24, if there was an event after school or a birthday party or anything and it was on a day they worked, it was an automatic no because they were at work. If it was on a day they had off, it was a no because they wanted to enjoy their day off. If I offered to be dropped off or picked up by a friend's parents or walk, it was a no because there could be serial killers waiting to kidnap me. My day was wake up, go to school, come home, eat dinner, go to bed. All day, every day. I had a really lonely childhood. Once people figured out ID, always say no to invites. Story 25, you have to say hello to the plants. Every morning, greet the houseplants. Respect the greenery. Spend time there. Well, I love that now. I'm going to follow it always. Story 26, one of my cousin's parents had this thing called grown-up candy, which was basically candy that they drilled into their head since they were young, was only for grown-ups. It was the parents' favorite candy too. Well, Mayo, kind of like alcohol. She was 16 when she figured out almond joys were consumable for children. Story 27, shut up was a swear word in our house. If we asked our parents if our friends could hang out in front of said friend, answer was immediately no. I had to ask to have a sleepover with a friend 7 days in advance. Anything less than that was immediately no. Doors were locked at 8:30 p.m. If we tried to come home after that, it was sleeping on the porch. We had a box on the porch that had pillows and blankets for this reason. Was not allowed to sleep in later than 9:15 a.m. on the weekends. Story 28, our dogs were allowed on the couch, but we weren't until my dad moved out when I was almost 16. Lots of other crazy 2OFC, but that one is kind of funny. Story 29, if we were ever trying to promise we were telling the truth and said, I swear my mom would say don't swear, it drove me crazy. That's not what they mean when people say swearing is bad. Her first language is English too. So to this day, I don't get it, but she was weirdly particular about a lot of stuff. Story 30, we were not allowed to use the stove, microwave, can openers, or knives. My parents also only cooked meals maybe 6 times a year. That left behind a really weird and complicated relationship with food. Story 31, painkillers and medication are only allowed as an absolute last resort. I had no idea painkillers and over-the-counter medication were used so often by other families, where the people regularly went to the doctors. Growing up, in my family, things had to be incredibly dire before you could get things like medication or painkillers. Sick with a stomach bug or cold. Do you need to go to the hospital? No. Then get your lazy up. No medication. Severed a ligament in your knee, which you very much should go to the hospital for. Walk it off. No painkillers. Story 32, if I thought it was normal in the sense of being common, but I thought it was acceptable, not being allowed to use the bathroom after a certain time in the morning because Dad wanted to reserve it for himself. Story 33, comparing your children. My sister had straight A's, and I struggled. Since I struggled, I was considered the dumb sister by teachers and by my family. That behavior never subsided, and I felt like I wasn't ever enough. My parents thought I was pretending not to be smart, and they'd punish me for it. Lost my phone, got spanked, and got yelled at for being stupid. It made me feel not enough in every way. I got transferred to a smaller school with smaller class sizes. It helped so much they didn't know I had a sister, so I wasn't getting comparisons from teachers anymore. Teachers took additional time to explain things, and when I struggled, they listened. This one teacher I had really noticed I was struggling and had me stay after class. I ended up telling him how my parents had this expectation because of my sister. My dad picked me up that day, and my teacher talked to him without me there. After that day, my dad started to understand and listen to me. What that teacher said, but it really made a huge difference. Story 34, women and girls were not allowed to whistle. I loved whistling and am very good at it. The rule was eventually softened to no girls whistling in the house. A whistling woman and a crowing hen never will come to a very good end, was the accompanying limerick. I bit back by becoming an extremely well-practiced all-state piccoloist. Story 35, we were not allowed to eat the candies on the Christmas tree until the priest came to bless the house and the tree, which usually happened after New Year. So we would have to look at all the candy for 1 to 2 weeks, but couldn't eat them. I remember one year we had pretty good stuff up there on the Christmas tree, like chocolate Santas, full-size chocolate bars, even Coca-Cola cans. We never had brand cola in the usual day-to-day life. It was agonizing. Story 36, my parents said that we had to have either an acceptance letter from a college or a leave date for boot camp the day we graduated from high school. They never said what would happen if we didn't. That wasn't a possibility. Story 37, we couldn't flush at night, so in the morning there would be loads of in the toilet. This honestly felt normal, but I now realize how weird that is. No feet allowed on furniture. I like to sit cross-legged on the couch. My dad got upset every time. Years later, as an adult in my mid-20s, even bringing my wife over to my parents' place, he got mad at me for not telling my wife to keep her feet off the furniture. My wife has never sat in a seat normally in her life. She was taken aback at first. She started to put her feet on me, and I sat normally. Kind of minor overall. As an aside, the first thing I did when I moved out and got a couch was put my feet up on it. Story 38, this is my favorite from my friend who escaped a controlling crazy mom. Their family couldn't use beach towels when they went to water parks, the pool, or the beach because they were too nice to get dirty. Couldn't use the regular shower towels because those can't go outside. They each got one small microfiber cloth to wipe it with for the day. Story 39, I was not allowed to sit in the aisle seat at the movies cause someone might stab me with a drug needle. As an older person, really as if someone would share their drugs, lol. Story 40, not mine, but my mom says my grandma used to make them take off all their clothes except the underwear at the corridor as soon as they got home. We suspect she had untreated OCD, lol. Story 41, if Dad was watching TV, we had to sit still in our chair, no lounging on the couch, no talking, definitely could not be on the phone. That was Dad's quiet time. I learned to read in my room in order to avoid him. Story 42, not leaving your room for any reason after 8:30 p.m. The only time it was allowed was for an emergency house on fire, and there was a camera pointed directly at my room with motion detection, so they always knew exactly when I was leaving my room. They learned the hard way that if I wasn't allowed to go to the bathroom at night, I would just to bed and come crying at their door about it. So then it was changed to me being allowed to go to the bathroom, but that was it. Story 43, I was not allowed to flip coins. It had something to do with how flipping coins in public made you look like an old-timey gangster or something. This was back in the 90s too. Story 44, don't talk about religion. My dad is atheist and would get so mad if I talked about God or Jesus as if they were real. He would give us a talking to about how they were fake. He'd ridicule the idea of angels, heaven, or an afterlife, and made it clear that we would all die and there was nothing after death. He'd laugh at my mother when she would find comfort in signs from dead relatives. Am atheist as a result. I think I would have become one anyway, but I think it would have been nice to believe in heaven when I was 7 and grandma was dying. Story 45, not a rule, but never eating anywhere where my dad couldn't have beer or wine. I was actually jealous of my friends who got to have McDonald's Happy Meals. Story 46, my parents would have to watch any movie before us. Didn't matter the rating, could have been G, and they would still have to watch it first before allowing us to watch it. And if they didn't like it, thought it was dumb or inappropriate, we didn't get to watch it. That rule lasted to about their 4th child. I'm the second oldest of 6. Story 47, dinner table, is for intellectual conversation about world events. We had to bring a topic for discussion daily. No small talk allowed. I was not once asked about my day or anything I do. I used to love bringing opposing points of view like Hitler and Pol Pot and Stalin to annoy my parents. Story 48, I believe this one's pretty common. My parents said it was illegal and also horrifying dangerous to have the overhead light on in the car while driving. I was honestly shocked to find out it was all lies. I could drive just fine with the light on. I still don't understand why they made it sound so dangerous. Story 49, not my parents, but my grandma used to watch me while my parents worked growing up. We weren't allowed to say, but pass gas instead, as it was rude and not ladylike. Also couldn't say pregnant, and instead said expecting or going to be a mom. Ironic, because my parents didn't really care about what I said. I guess my grandma was just really strict about her phrases. Story 50, not a rule. But my parents had me so convinced I had to eat the crust of bread because it was the most nutritious part. Was like 30 years old before I realized it's just well-done bread. Story 51, we weren't allowed any toys with guns. Mom even wouldn't buy us Lego if the set had a gun. But Star Wars was somehow okay because blasters aren't guns. Story 52, before cell phones, of course. I couldn't get phone calls to the house after 9 p.m. on weeknight. On weekends, though, it was extended to 1017. When asked why that specific time, I was told if I ask again, weekends would also be 9. I'm 33, and I still don't have the answer. Story 53, if you slam your door, it gets taken off. And the notion that privacy is a privilege for children obviously wouldn't do that to my potential kids, but I thought at least more people would have that experience. Story 54, daily checking of grades the second. Yes, second. I got home from school. It will be pulled up on my dad's laptop. I'm 22 now, and am still not fully recovered from the verbal abuse that came with me getting an 85 instead of an A. Now, I make more money than my father did when he was in his late 30s, and I don't even have a college degree. Sometimes I send him screenshots of my bank account. Just as you, I turned out just fine. It feels really good. Story 55, stepmom had a 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. rule. No phone calls before or after, no friends. No waking up and bugging them for anything. This includes Christmas morning, although that did get moved to 8 a.m. We weren't allowed to leave our rooms until then. She would also listen when we would go to the bathroom to make sure we washed our hands. If she thought we didn't, she would go make sure the sink was wet. Story 56, you cannot bang or ding your spoon against the side. Only silently scrape it against the bottom of the bowl or carefully stir in a teacup. When I got to an age to eat at others' houses, I was shocked at all the spoon banging going on. Story 57, I lived with my mom and her partner at the time. I wasn't allowed in the house unless my mother was home, so I'd have to wait outside after school until she got home from work. Even in the cold winters, the partner would also spend hours in the bathroom every day, and if my sibling or I had to use the bathroom, we had to go outside in the yard. I wasn't allowed to use Wi-Fi at home, even though we had it. I wasn't allowed in certain rooms, wasn't allowed to cook or touch basically anything in the house. I moved out of there when I was 16. Story 58, 5-minute alert. 5-minute alert. You've been on the phone for 5 minutes. Time to get off. Yeah, my dad only allowed everybody in the house to be on the phone for 5 minutes at a time because the phone is a tool, not a toy. If you stayed on the phone after you were alerted, he'd just unplug it. Story 59, no marbles or bouncy or small spherical objects of any kind. I thought this rule was because my brother inhaled the ammunition of his homemade blowguns. The first time, it was one of those individually wrapped cinnamon jawbreakers you get at Halloween. The second time, it was a pipe cleaner he had wadded up and coiled into a ball. He's probably the only person in the world who's inhaled a pipe cleaner hole. Nope. Turns out that regular old naked doctor playing pretend just wasn't adventurous enough for him. Instead, he and one of our neighbor girls decided to play their own version of Hungry, Hungry Hippos. He'd shove all of the marbles in the game into her Hungry, Hungry Hippo, and then she'd jump up and down to get them back out. Story 60, literally not allowed to relax. As an adult, I would still jump up and look busy, so I wasn't deemed lazy and get yelled at when my spouse would come home or into a room until one day I realized that he didn't care, and he certainly didn't do this when I came home or into a room. Story 61, I started working at 16 and only got 10 of my paycheck until I was 25. Parents took the rest of the money for themselves. Then I was expected to have enough money to buy my own car. Story 62, no dating anyone until I'd known them for a year. And I had to talk to them every day for that year. Miss a day, start over. In practice, I knew it was impossible, so I never even tried. In retrospect, I think they wanted to keep me from dating before I got my driver's license, so they didn't have to take me places and pick me up. But because of the rule, I didn't date anyone until I was in college. TBH, though, I knew this was not at all normal. Story 63, both my parents had weird rules about my clothes. I wasn't allowed to wear leggings or anything that went higher than my knees. Even though my mom was Catholic, it wasn't a rule based on religion. I remember my mom calling the other 11-year-old girls in my class skank sluts for wearing clothes like that, and also saying that by dressing like that, which was a very normal way for girls my age to dress, they were asking for it. As a result, I haven't worn clothes from the women's section since I was first allowed to pick out clothes that I actually liked and felt comfortable in, which was when I was about 14. Before that, I would cry every time I had to get new clothes because all of the clothes in the girls' women's section seemed like they would cause me to get hurt. Story 64, if I went out at night, I had to be home by midnight. Otherwise, I would be locked out and would have to find somewhere to spend the night. I was never given a house key. Story 65, in the summer, my parents would lock my brother and I out of the house bright and early on Saturday mornings, and we weren't allowed to come home until dinner time. Story 66, not weird per se, but more of a realization. Growing up on Sunday mornings, we were not allowed to watch TV, play Nintendo, or even read the funnies before church. My parents said we wasted too much time, so we'd get all dressed up for church and sit and wait to leave in silence. When I was 18, my brother 19, and I moved out to an apartment by our college, I woke up on a Sunday morning and went to the living room to see him playing PS2. I was like, dude, you can't play before church. And then it hit me. I could finally do what I wanted when I wanted. It was like a revelation. What's funny is that we didn't even go to church that Sunday, or for the next few months, just muscle memory. Story 67, not me, but my friend's grandparents. She wanted me to come hang out there and meet them. They had a rule that you could not say the word. You had to say potty burp instead, which is infinitely more disgusting than the word. My dad said I wasn't allowed to go over there anymore because clearly something was wrong those people. Story 68, well, I thought it was rules for everyone, but turns out it was just all my mom's weird superstition and wives' tales. I still get mad at her for making me believe and still worry that something bad may happen if I put new shoes on the table. Story 69, I have a few, but they're all kind of under the same umbrella of being what my family considered proper. Only classical music was allowed. I didn't mind it because classical music is anyway. This one kind of stuck. It's still most of what I listened to. TV was only news or documentaries. I was home alone a lot, so I would sometimes sneak some other things in. So I knew some cartoons kids my age watched. Video games were fine. Go figure, movies were all pretty much right out. This one stuck too. I watched like one movie every 5 or 6 years. I watched some TV series, but movies are very rare. Story 70, I had to wait for the owner of the house I was visiting to ask if I was hungry or thirsty. I wasn't allowed to ask myself. Children are seen and not heard. Story 71, we were not permitted to eat or drink except water from the sink, except what was served to us at mealtimes. My sister and I weren't allowed to open the refrigerator or pantry. I didn't realize other kids didn't have these rules until I was at least 12. Story 72, we weren't allowed to pass on the stairs. If someone was coming up while we wanted to come down, we had to yield for good luck. We also were not allowed to take off a shirt if we put on inside out. We needed another person to do it for us, again, for some luck superstition. I asked Mom when I was a teen, what if I put my shirt on wrong and I'm home alone? Crickets. Story 73, hay race, a more wholesome one. I guess we had to finish our homework on Saturdays, so that Sunday could be a true break with no homework hanging over our heads. Story 74, if your room wasn't military levels of clean, the bedroom door bed theme would be removed. Sleeping on a mattress on the floor wasn't too bad, but getting changed was really a chore as a teenage girl, especially because my brother would always have friends over. Story 75. No violent media shows, video games, etc., and all MPSRB ratings are taken at complete face value. What's the crazy part is my parents are very liberal in every other aspect, gave me very good education about drugs, etc., when it was appropriate for my age, of course, not religious, racist, homophobic. I spent my childhood listening to music with swear words in it, and dark themes, Pink Floyd The Wall, for example. But I wasn't allowed to watch Teen Titans the original, not Teen Titans Go, when I was 7 because it was too violent. When I was 12, I wasn't allowed to play Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess because it was rated T for fantasy violence. I wasn't allowed to play Skyrim until I was actually 17 years old, and the game had been out for over 5 years. Because when you hit people, there is blood, and they die. Story 76. We weren't allowed to dine out very often, and never ever fast food. We owned a restaurant, and my dad thought that was where we should eat. My mom and I snuck out on occasion. Story 77. I wasn't allowed to get girls' numbers, talk to them online, or hang out with them after school or on weekends. So many girls try to talk to me, and after following this rule, I am in my 30s with a terrible social life. Story 78. I wasn't allowed to change my clothes when my brothers and dad were home. Sometimes I would have to sleep in my jeans or school clothes because they would always be home, lol. My mom was okay to change in the house, just not me. I'm also the only daughter, and my brothers are 10 years older than me. This rule started when I was 8. My mom had to supervise my showers till I was 16. My dad's orders a lot more weird things like though, but I left at 18. Story 79. It took me until I moved out to realize people don't usually spend their time at home in jeans and other uncomfortable clothes, sweatpants, etc. Were only supposed to be worn during exercise. My partner still doesn't understand how long I lived before being comfortable. Story 80. No drink or salt and pepper at the table during dinner. It would be insulting to the cook mom if you season the food, and it would be rude to wash the food down with liquid. Story 81. I wasn't allowed to watch PG movies, let alone PG-13 movies when I was 13. Those are mom's rules, but my parents were divorced, and when I went to spend summers with my dad, it was a totally different story. He let me watch whatever age and appropriate I wanted. There weren't any curfews as long as I stayed in the general neighborhood. He even bought me wine coolers and didn't care that I stole his cigarettes. I spent most of my childhood going from one unhealthy extreme to another. I went from a stifling, uber-religious, oppressive, prudish environment to waking up on Saturday and Sunday mornings and finding random adults passed out on couches and floors after a night of hard partying. I was so jealous of my friends who had normal parents who set reasonable boundaries. Story 82. Colored socks only that had to match my pants, which had to match one color of my shirt, which had to match my ponytail holder. Why? Because white socks were for gym class. Only, I mean no wire hangers levels of not allowing white socks. Only exception was the frilly lace ones on Easter, and I swear they got thrown away immediately because I'd never see them again. Story 83. Making meat helmets, luge lessons, spending summers in Rangoon, and being placed in a burlap bag and beaten with reeds after having been insolent was not normal. Story 84. Not me, but my brother's wife. She thought you couldn't go through a drive-thru if you didn't have cash. She was like 23 when my brother said, "Let's stop at Taco Bell," and she dug through her purse and said she couldn't go because she had no cash. And my brother was like, "No worries, I have my card." And she said, "You can't use the drive-thru with a card." Story 85. My father would threaten to beat me for leaving my ceiling fan turning while I was at school. Also had to turn the water off while in the shower, and I wasn't using it. Basically get in the shower, get body and hair wet and rag, or whatever to wash yourself. Turn water off, wash hair and body, turn water on and rinse. I also wasn't allowed to be in there without the water running for more than like 5 minutes. I'm assuming the goal was to save on water, but even now as an adult, I don't think it's worth it. You get cold standing there wet trying to wash yourself. Story 86. My dad would call home at 11 a.m. every weekday. If there was anyone home and the phone had to be answered, no ifs, ands, or buts. On the occasions we didn't answer, he would frantically call for 5 or so minutes before getting in the car to come home and check on us. Turns out Dad has ritualistic OCD and would genuinely believe we died in our sleep, electrocuted ourselves, to starve, burn the house down if we didn't answer. Also can only walk particular routes from his car and to work into the shops, or else his family will die, etc.